Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our 8th fellowship graduation for the John D. Solomon Fellowship for Public Service. I think it goes without saying, as with everything else this spring, this graduation is very different from our usual ceremony. We had visions and we hoped that we would be at Barnard like in years past, of course, mingling and enjoying the delicious lunch up there. But I can't say it enough how really glad we are to have this time to pause for a few moments and to recognize a truly special group of young men and women. For those of you I don't know, and I know because of this format, one of the silver linings is that people outside of New York that maybe haven't been able to be part of the graduation or Solomon events, I understand from the West Coast or other Massachusetts, they're able to log on. I feel like we might have some of the fellows' parents or friends, families. So we want to welcome all of you, and we're really so happy to have you all here. My name is Christina Farrell. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for External Affairs here at New York City Management. And so as we move to the graduation, we'd like to start this graduation with a moment of silence. Tragically, we've lost tens of thousands of New Yorkers to COVID-19, and obviously across the country. And while the numbers are improving, we know that we're still losing too many of our fellow residents and neighbors every day. Like every other organization in New York City, many of our staff members have experienced direct loss, and very sadly, one of our own New York City emergency management employees, FDNY emergency medical technician Gregory Hodge, who had worked in our watch command for several years, and I think had also taken photographs of some of the Solomon Fellowship events because he loved to take photos. He sadly in April succumbed to this virus. So I'm going to ask everyone to join me in a moment of silence while we honor Greg and everyone else that we as a city and a country and a world obviously have collectively lost. Thank you. Although it seems hard to remember now on May 13th, the vast majority of this year's fellowship was much like the 7 years before it. We chose the fellows for each agency around this time last spring. We welcomed them to the program, as you saw in some of those photos in September. And of course, as is true for all emergency managers, we put them to work right away. So while juggling grad school, family obligations, part-time jobs, and other commitments, volunteer and other, each of these students also pledged to work at least 15 to 20 hours per week at their agency and within their unit. Throughout the year, as you just saw, we held many special events. We were able to read about the fellows' experiences on LinkedIn, and we looked forward to having the Solomon Family event, which was scheduled for March originally, as well as this graduation. As everyone knows, pretty quickly then everything changed. While New York City has not exactly been on the cutting edge of working from home policies, suddenly hundreds of thousands of city employees were logging on, finding quietish spaces at home for conference calls and increasingly video calls, and reimagining their workloads in many innovative ways. And of course, there are many city workers, including people in this building, whose jobs don't allow them to work remotely. So the city worked quickly to employ social distancing and other safe work processes, supplied them with appropriate personal protective equipment, or PPE, as everyone now calls it, and other materials to keep them safe and allow them to do what they do best, help their fellow New Yorkers. And through all the challenges and the changes, and yes, even the fears, our 10 intrepid John D. Solomon Fellows, as of course we would expect, didn't miss a beat. They went remote, they did whatever was asked of them, and although we weren't able to see them every day, we know they were doing it all with a smile. In late April, our mentors participated in a full day of interviews for 20 finalists that will ultimately form the 2020-2021 John D. Solomon Fellowship for Public Service class. We're excited to work with them next year to meld this class into our alumni network. And we know that undoubtedly we will work with some of these fellows as they secure jobs with the city or across government. In a few years, we'll hear from the fellows and get a taste of all the work that they worked on and everything they learned this year. But before we do that, I just want to thank a few people that have worked with and for our fellows this year. First, I want to thank the Solomon family and friends, especially Jim, Benita, Abby, Ann, and Dick, for their support of this great fellowship, as well as their ongoing friendship. They all work to ensure that this fellowship retains John's spirit, and for that, we are very grateful. We also want to give a hearty thank you to our mentors who guide our fellows and take time from their busy schedules to not only attend our special events, but also to plan them. We were able, as I said, to hold many of these events in the first 2/3 of the fellowship, although some had to be canceled. And sadly, we had to cancel the perennial popular taste testing at the New York City Department of Education kitchen. So we certainly look forward to when we can resume these in-person fellowship events. Even when many, although not all, of our mentors and administrative staff transitioned to remote work, they continue to be there for the fellows. From giving them new assignments, checking in on their well-being, and taking time from their crazy busy schedules to review resumes and interview candidates for next year's class, our John D. Solomon mentors showed once again why they are the best of what New York City employees have to offer. So we want to thank all of you. And we want to give a special thank you to our fellowship management team. Those of you who have been involved with the fellowship for a while will remember that Catherine Howard was the day in, day out voice of the program. Last summer, she was promoted to Director of Plan Management within our agency and is now leading the effort to adapt our plans to our ever-changing environment. So since July, Amanda Kravchuk has been running the fellowship, assisted by 2 new employees, Erica Amaya and Janelle Stewart. The team has done a terrific job this year, and I'm very proud to say that the fellowship accomplished a first this year in its 8-year history. We started with 10 fellows in September, and we are finishing with those same 10 fellows today. While this is a testament to our fellows, it's also due in large part to the support and guidance our administrative team has provided to the fellows, mentors, Ira, and myself. When Jim, Solomon, Ira, and I sat down in early 2011 to imagine what this fellowship might look like and how we could create something to honor and celebrate John's legacy, we had high hopes and expectations, as we always do. While the fellowship continues to grow and we all continue to learn, I'm so proud of what we have accomplished, and I look forward to what lies ahead. Now I would like to introduce Deanne Criswell, the Commissioner of New York City Emergency Management, to say a few words.
Thank you, Christina, and good morning, everybody. I'm very happy to be here for the graduation of the 2019-2020 class of John D. Solomon Fellows. Well, I've only been at New York City Emergency Management for a little over 10 months, and I must say it really feels like many years at this point. I've already grown to love this special program. When I was at FEMA, I was part of the creation of the FEMA Corps program. This was a unique team-based service program that gave 18 to 24-year-old participants the opportunity to serve their communities that were impacted by disaster, while at the same time gaining professional development experience. When I got to this agency, I first learned about this fellowship. I was excited to see that the ideals behind FEMA Corps were alive and well here in the John D. Solomon Fellowship. Over this past year, my most direct involvement with this fellowship has been working with several of its alumni who are now employed at New York City Emergency Management. Amanda Kravchuk, who manages the daily operations of the fellowship, in addition to her many other responsibilities in the public-private unit, is a great young leader with a bright future. Robert Bristol, who was a fellow at New York City Department of Education a few years back, is a star within our health and medical unit and has worked tirelessly to first set up and then deliver services at the Javits Alternate Care Facility in response to COVID. Amy Hung is another of our health and medical staff and another proud fellowship alum, as is Stephanie Liu, who works in our agency's transportation unit. Seeing these future leaders manage complex projects this year, and specifically over the past few months, as we have been consumed with COVID, has shown me the quality of the individuals that go through this fellowship. It really speaks to the expertise and training that they have received, as they are honestly running operations usually taken on by staff members with several years of experience, yet these fellowship alum are all in their first job after graduate school. I know that the 10 fellows graduating today will go on to accomplish just as much in a short time as the more than 60 fellows that have graduated before them. Next, I want to emphasize the importance of this fellowship in New York City and to thank all of you for being part of it. Over the past 8 years, we have had 60 outstanding fellows who have worked with 15 different agencies for a total of over 25,000 hours. The fellows have done excellent work in enhancing the city's plans and protocols, engaging with the public, and working alongside our emergency managers to strengthen this great city. Each of the fellows here today is an extraordinary example of the leaders of tomorrow. I know that the enthusiasm and energy you brought to your work has re-inspired the mentors you worked with and reminded them why we all decided to pursue a career in public service. And of course, the fellowship this year, just like everything this year, is different than before. This fellowship started in the fall of 2012, which corresponded to Hurricane Sandy wreaking havoc across New York City. Much like that first class of fellows who 6 weeks into their fellowship were thrust into new roles and assignments, this class of fellows found themselves in a radical new situation for the last several weeks of their placements. While it may have been easier for graduate students who grew up in the digital age to adjust to this new remote work than it was for the majority of the city's employees, who overnight started working from home, it was still a big change for these students. In true fellowship fashion, these 10 students didn't miss a beat. They continued to do whatever was asked of them at whatever hour or whatever day it was asked. They realized that their mentors and the other staff members in their units were incredibly busy. They used the experience they gained during the first 6 months of their fellowships and made game time decisions. They have also been invaluable in adding depth to the small units they work in, so staff could actually take a few hours, or as the weeks went by, a few days or even 2 days off, knowing that they had adequate coverage. 2 of our fellows, Alex and Stacy, are also able to continue providing assistance for our COVID response. Having these extra resources is valuable as we now are adapting the city's heat, power disruption, and hurricane plans to include social distancing strategies to keep our most vulnerable New Yorkers safe during heat waves and coastal storms. We are currently putting together the next class of John D. Solomon Fellows, and thanks to the generosity of many of you watching today, who will start in September, we are also able to continue the program with a class of 10 fellows who will start in September. We don't know exactly what these fellows will be walking into come this fall, but we know just like these current fellows, they will hit the ground running, adapt to whatever situation exists, and make meaningful contributions to their agencies and the field of emergency management. But enough from me. I'd like to now hear from our true stars of this program, this year's class of John D. Solomon Fellows.
Thank you. So as the commissioner said, we will now go through with the 10 fellows, and they're each going to share a little bit about their experiences this year. We're going to start with Ariel Martel, who was placed at the New York City Police Department in the auxiliary unit.
Hi, everyone. I had an amazing experience working with the NYPD and their auxiliary police. As you may know, the NYPD auxiliary police are the largest volunteer force in the country, with over 4,000 members. They assist the NYPD with uniform patrols, providing crowd control and other services during major events. I am grateful to have seen firsthand how a police department operates, and it has made me excited about future job possibilities I could have in law enforcement. Through my fellowship responsibilities, I developed presentations on how to prepare for NYC area disasters for the incoming auxiliary police classes and went to multiple locations to give this presentation, including the police academy. I learned how the auxiliary police manage their inventory of safety equipment, hundreds of vehicles, and one auxiliary police boat. I was able to assist in a number of ceremonies, such as auxiliary police graduation, promotions, and longevity ceremonies. I also helped with auxiliary police orientation and open enrollment at APS headquarters. I met members from the NYPD's executive staff and heard former Commissioner O'Neill speak. In March, I created a COVID-19 specific presentation, but this was ultimately not used as the program was put on pause to protect the volunteer members. I assisted as needed remotely for the fellowship's final weeks and helped to create a survey to gain feedback from active auxiliary police members. Thank you to Sergeant Lewis the NYPD, NYSM, and the Solomon family for this opportunity.
For Elbe Ramirez, who was placed at the New York City Department of Environmental Protection.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Miguel Ramirez. I interned at the Department of Environmental Protection, specifically with the Bureau of Public Affairs and Communications. Over the year, I had one major project, and it involved developing researching a public notification plan for the team. My project involved doing research on public notification plans for other major cities to give BPAC a sense of how these municipalities quickly communicate and inform the public. A public notification plan is basically a guideline for how to educate and inform the public and protect the public health. To the right, you'll see a picture of a water main break. I had the opportunity to actually go to this water main break in Sunset Park. It happened in November 2019. It was huge. It took weeks to repair. But when it comes to actually contacting and communicating with the public regarding these incidents, they do happen frequently throughout New York City. And it's important to not only communicate with the public in a swift manner, but to also maintain trust and credibility throughout these communications. And risk and crisis theory really helps with that. So the objective of communications is to really inform the public and to get them to react to these hazards appropriately. And there are three types of communications that we can use in order to do this. So precautionary advisory communications inform the public of what's happening and what they need to do regarding these situations. They tend to be low outrage situations. Outrage management is when the current risk does not justify the public's reaction. So it's a low hazard, high outrage situation. And crisis communications are obviously when the public is fearful, and the objective is to inform them of what to do and to provide accurate information. These are high hazard, high outrage situations. So overall, risk communications is really determined by hazard and outrage, and kind of creating a balance between those two things. And all of my research was done by contacting emergency managers across the country. I had the opportunity to speak with individuals in LA, Atlanta, DC, and they definitely all provided me with one simple guideline, and it was to basically follow the US Environmental Protection Agency guidelines for public notification plans. All cities are different, and obviously BPAC's public notification plan has to be catered to the city. I just want to thank Mikkel, Adgate, and Michael Deluche for their help with all of my research and their guidance, and the Solomon family for this great opportunity.
Thank you, Miguel. We will now, in order, hear from the three fellows that were placed at emergency management. We'll start with Alex Wilson, who's in our public-private initiatives unit.
Hey, good morning, everyone. So I correctly was placed with public-private. I worked with Erica, Janelle, and Amanda, which was a treat. I think we worked really well. You too, Ira. Initially, a lot of my responsibilities were what I realize now, setting the foundation for kind of the situation we're in now, right? So I was working on, you can see on my slide, I was working with GIS to create a map that would combine our partnerships with chambers of commerce, as well as business improvement districts across the city. And those would be point of contacts in case of an emergency. So that was really interesting. I've never worked with GIS before. I was also updating a lot of small documents that really needed to be updated with information like flow charts and stuff like that. a project that I was really excited about to partner with Janelle was creating research to better understand the needs of small businesses that we have not had the opportunity to touch yet. We were going to create that research and also form those connections at the same time. And like so Miguel mentioned, right? It's a lot about transparency. It's a lot about educating the public. So those were two of our main goals. We also had the opportunity to do outreach through going to schools, going to big industry networks like HBO, and we would do small presentations and educate the public about, very basic things like where their flood zones are, where their evacuation zones are. So that was really informative and great learning experience. Obviously, things had transitioned. And when COVID began really gaining momentum, I found myself in a very fortunate position because I had some of the language and some of the tools and the foundation to talk about what needed to happen. Obviously, I had really strong communication on our team. And so right now we're working a lot constantly with the private sector. This is a complex situation. It's changing every day, and they need the most accurate and up-to-date information about parking, about the next executive order. And so that's really become my responsibility, and it's felt so purposeful, honestly. I feel really oddly fortunate to be in a situation where I know that I'm assisting. And again, we get emails in the inbox about rumors, and I get to be a part of disseminating the truth based on information rather than rumors. And that information helps people make the most informed decisions that they can make and guide them in the choices that they're going to make for their business, for economic recovery, for reopening. So it's a vital position. What we do at NYSEM, there's nothing, there's not another job like it. It's really, really special and it's really important. I feel really lucky to be placed with my team. As I said, I think we're a great fit and I've learned so much and I'm really, really happy and I feel really proud to be able to stay on. So I thank you, everyone. I feel so lucky. I wish we could be doing this in person, but I'm really glad we have the opportunity to share and I get to hear about everybody else's experiences. So thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Next, we'll hear from Khalid Islam, who was a fellow in Emergency Management's Training Exercises and Evaluation Unit.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for putting this together. Just to give a quick background about myself, I had been working in the EMS field as a paramedic for close to 15 years. With EMS, you follow a clinical sort of track. So either you make paramedic your career for the rest of your life, or you move on to becoming a nurse or a doctor or a PA or some other type of clinician. So I was feeling a bit lost. I was involved in EMS education at the time, but I felt like I could be doing a bit more. So I decided to explore what other options EMS personnel could pursue, and emergency management was one option. I am still attending John Jay College through the CUNY system and their emergency management grad program. But while I was in school, and it is a phenomenal program, I felt I needed a bit more hands-on experience. I'm a tactile learner. When we're out in the EMS field, we work with our hands a lot. So I felt like I need to be in the mix. And fortunately, a random Facebook ad popped up with the John D. Solomon Fellowship details. And I said, you know what, let me just give it a shot. Not really paying attention as to the potential of what this program could do for me. Fortunately, I was contacted, went through the process, and then landed in a training exercise in the EOC unit at New York City Emergency Management. First off, I have to give a sincere thank you to Robert Cohen, who was my mentor during my time there. Not only did he guide me as to the practicalities of emergency management, but he really presented a whole package image of how a person should act, how they should speak, how they should communicate with each other in an organization like emergency management, which is unique in some ways because it's not only the organization itself, it's an organization that works with other organizations. I mean, that's probably one of the biggest components to New York City Emergency Management. So I'm dealing with NYPD, the FDNY, and all these different agencies in one central location. Robert made sure that I was involved in all aspects of the division. He right away put me to work in assisting with training within the EOC itself, explaining what the EOC does, Emergency Operations Center, to people that would be involved with the EOC during activations. I helped revamp the workbook that they utilize for that training. There's also large interagency trainings that occur throughout the year. One of them, I believe, had over 150 participants. So I was very fortunate to be involved with that training exercise, all from start to finish, from the details to the actual execution of the training itself. So that in itself was a wonderful, wonderful experience. I was able to go over different forms that the EOC uses, try to revise those forms, and compiled a lot of information for the different activations that occurred while I was there. The one big activation that occurred on the onset was a Queens sewer water main break. Rob made sure that I could sit down in different meetings, learn about how the agencies interacted with each other, and also help develop a timeline of the events to reflect on what actions we took as an agency ourselves. And I have to say that was probably one of the best things, was to be able to sit down at these various meetings of different levels of providers that were there and really get to learn how emergency management should be working in the real world. And upon the arrival of COVID-19, Robert made sure that, I was involved with that from the onset. I sat down on various meetings for that, created timelines for them. And then unfortunately, once remote work became a bit more enforced, I had to sort of remove myself from the physical location and offered my services in any way. I have to say, sincere thank you to the John D. Solomon family for really pushing this fellowship forward alongside with New York City Emergency Management. It truly is a beneficial fellowship for people looking to explore this field. So the support has been immaculate from everyone. I never at any time felt like a student. I never at any time felt like the person being sent out to get coffee for everyone. I truly felt like I was part of the team, and I truly felt like that the tools and skills needed to understand emergency management were being provided for me throughout my whole time there. So thank you to everyone that was involved. I really, really appreciate my time.
Great, thank you, Khalid. Now we'll hear from Stacy Powell, who was the Intergovernmental Affairs Fellow at Emergency Management.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing safe and well. Hope you're all safe and well. I'm grateful to have had this opportunity to work with the Intergovernmental Affairs team at NICEM. They were truly an amazing team to work with. And like everyone else has said, I echo the sentiment. They really did put us to work the first day. And although the circumstances were not ideal, I have been able to take part of 2 activations. I was able to observe and even take part in the collaboration to help New Yorkers, and it has been an amazing experience. I can honestly say I have learned more about this city in the 9 months in this fellowship than I have from living here my whole life. I have been able to take part of meetings, do research, analyze information and legislation that can directly impact my fellow New Yorkers. The way I view policy has changed, and I feel I'm lucky to be in the middle of my master's program and not at the end of it, because now I can carry this experience forward with me into my studies with an informed perspective. This is an opportunity that I will treasure because understanding the intricate pieces that go into responding to events like the one we're all in right now is vital to understanding it in the future. And I got an inside look that most of my peers did not get to experience. I look forward to graduating from my master's program with a clearer view of what is going on in my world and hopefully a future in emergency management or public service. I am also grateful that I get to continue for a little while with the program, but more than anything else, I thank the Solomon family so much for giving us this opportunity to learn about the city and give back more than anything else.
Thank you, Stacy. Next, we will hear from Alex Ellis, who's the fellow at New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. So she had a super quiet year.
you. Yes, my name is Alexandra. I'm the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene Fellow in the Community Engagement and Response team. And my project was part of a broader initiative to reach traditionally underserved populations through partner engagement and bidirectional communication. And my focus was primarily on LGBT plus populations throughout the city. These groups are traditionally underserved, and emergencies just exacerbate that risk. So really, we were trying to focus on how to be more effective in the ways that we're approaching these groups. New York has a really fascinating history of community action during emergencies. And so this project was really hoping to capitalize on that and to look at how groups that are traditionally serving LGBT populations and also those who are traditionally underserving them could be engaged better, to be better informed and better prepared, especially those who have previously worked in through 9/11 or Hurricane Sandy and already have these kind of channels and don't realize that they're already doing emergency preparedness. So that was kind of my primary goal for the majority of the fellow year, through lit reviews, developing outreach strategies and materials. And then the final step was to actually deliver some of these presentations to some partners. But of course, COVID popped up and that got a little bit derailed. So as you would imagine, DOHMH is quite busy right now, as is the CER team. But it's been a really fascinating experience because most of the CER team transitioned to this community partnership and engagement unit, which is completely brand new. It's kind of an unprecedented effort to really do community engagement deliberately during an emergency nationally. And the CPE unit is really creating the ship as they're sailing. So much of it is kind of trial and error, and the way that they're putting these things together is really, not to sound dramatic, but inspirational to see kind of how this is happening in real time. So most of my role, because a lot of this is new, was kind of general support, doing whatever was helpful at the time. I did some analysis and coding. I did some work with the emergency partner engagement councils that were being developed, and kind of supporting partner updates. But overall, I think what was most valuable for me was kind of having the opportunity to, through osmosis, experience how to really operationalize equity during an experience like this, and kind of hearing what was happening in the community. It kind of allowed us to have a really direct channel to the community organizations that were actively doing this work throughout the city and try to inform work at DOHMH with that information. So I think I was very fortunate to be there. Thank you to Lou and the CER team and the Solomon family for having me this year.
Thank you, Alexandra. Next, we'll hear from Patrick Morey, who is at the New York City Department of Social Services.
Pandemic. A lot of the agency's clients are part of the populations that are most vulnerable. The agency faces unique challenges like managing homeless shelters during this time. It employs thousands of essential workers that had to go in throughout the pandemic. And I was really fortunate to be able to sit in on a lot of agency leadership meetings and really just gain an education in crisis management, and lend my assistance, particularly in tracking some data and helping maintain situational awareness throughout the pandemic to provide to the agency leadership. So prior to COVID, one of my main projects was to work on updating training materials for the Shelter Command Center. So DSS really works in sheltering. So in the case of a coastal storm, the city opens up evacuation centers and hurricane shelters, and those shelters are staffed by city employees who don't necessarily have a background in emergency management. And there's job action sheets, which basically tell them how to fulfill these roles in the shelters. So I worked on updating those training materials. Another thing I'm proud of during my time in this fellowship was I took advantage of training opportunities offered by NISM. I was on track to completing the emergency management certificate program, came up a little bit short because of COVID canceling a lot of those trainings, but I was really lucky to be able to take advantage of all the opportunities that NISM offered through training. And finally, I'd just like to say that this opportunity has been amazing, providing me a great background in emergency management. I hope to continue my experience in the field in Washington, D.C., where I'm originally from. And I just want to thank all my colleagues and mentors at DSS and NISM and the Solomon family. This has been such a wonderful opportunity, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. And I'll say the good news is that Khalid's mentor, Robert Cohen, is the one who oversees the certificate program. So if Khalid puts in a good word for you, you probably can have your time extended to finish out the certificate training. So next we'll hear from Sam Robertson, who was at the Department of Education.
All right. Hi, everyone. Working for the past year at the Department of Education has been a really great opportunity to sort of take what I've learned in the classroom from a more theoretical perspective and actually see it work itself out in practice. I've had the opportunity to work on a lot of plans for pre-disaster mitigation efforts in schools, which has been very cool. But I want to talk a little bit more about the DOE's response to COVID-19, which I think has been pretty incredible in a lot of ways. When this all started, it seemed like closing schools were the obvious answer for an initial action for the DOE to do. But one thing I think a lot of us know is that when an emergency hits, often it doesn't hit proportionally among different populations. The more socially vulnerable populations are often hit the hardest. So there's a huge number of students in the Department of Education school system that rely on a decent meal from the school every day. So it was really inspiring to see the DOE commit, even though that they are going to close schools for class, they're still committed to providing meals for students when they need them. But this situation is affecting New York City just beyond the school system. We have more people out of work than seemingly ever before. So the fact that the DOE expanded the free meal program to any New Yorker who needs a free meal, no questions asked really, has been truly inspiring. And it's really reminded me exactly why I chose to apply for this fellowship in the first place and why these emergency management is so important to begin with. So with that, I just want to thank my team at the DOE, everyone at NISM, and especially the Solomon family for this experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Next, we'll hear from Hannah Myers, who was placed with the American Red Cross in Greater New York.
Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah, and I was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to conduct my fellowship at the American Red Cross this year. I worked under Wiki O'Brien, the Regional Director of Fiscal Controls, Contracts, and Reporting, and was able to see emergency management from so many different sects of Red Cross operations. During my time at the Red Cross, I was able to train with the daily disaster response teams, conduct a research project on the disaster cycle services and volunteer services across the country, and help with the annual Share the Red volunteer recruitment event. My experience allowed me to build my skills in research and communication, as well as gain a hands-on experience in emergency response. Obviously, the COVID pandemic had an impact on my experience as we were unable to go into the office once the pandemic started. However, that provided me with the opportunity to assist in finding the next fellow for the Red Cross, which is a really interesting and exciting experience. Since the COVID pandemic started, I've definitely seen my career aspirations shift more towards a infectious disease kind of shift. However, my passion for emergency and crisis management has grown, and I'm excited to see where the future will take me in this field. I just want to extend thank you and the entire Red Cross team for welcoming me and guiding me throughout the whole time that I was with them, the NISM Fellowship team, and the Solomon family for this amazing experience.
Great, thank you, Hannah. So the last fellow we will hear from is Betty Fletcher, who was with the fire department.
Hi, my name is Betty, and I worked at the fire department in the Office of Public Information on a variety of projects, which I've highlighted here. And prior to this experience, I hadn't really thought about or engaged in any communication work. And so every day that I got to go into the fellowship was a new day to learn lots of different things. And it helped me to understand the crucial role that communication plays in emergency management. And I think that's been particularly underscored during this unique situation that we find ourselves in now. It's really helped me to see how important it is to get out accurate and timely information and what that can do for an emergency response. So I just wanted to thank my mentors at the fire department, particularly Patty and Pascal, and also wanted to thank the Solomon family for this wonderful opportunity.
Thank you, Betty. So if we were at Barnard, if we were all together, this is the time when we all would be applauding very heartily for all of you, for all of your work, for all the help from the mentors. So please just know that we're all doing that in our own way. And now, so we can flash forward a couple of years so you'll see where you may end up. We're happy to have Rob Bristol here, who, as we noted, was a fellow at DOE a few years ago. He's had a lot on his plate recently, and we wanted to catch up with him. So thanks, Robert.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me speak at this graduation. The fellowship experience to me was a very important part in my career. Coming from a private sector healthcare career, city government and public service was something entirely new for me. It was an amazing opportunity to experience the inner workings of city government. There is a lot to learn, as you'll continue to learn throughout your careers. And throughout the fellowship, working with the DOE, I was able to own and collaborate on real world projects and problems, which gave me, and as you have learned in your fellowship, just a world of experience. And I also learned to create relationships and not just passing business cards before the activation, as the old adage goes, but real working relationships and deeper than just passing a business card. Being able to see somebody in a planning work group or in a real world activation and having a personal connection with that individual and being able to work together to find a solution or to mitigate the emergency. And bringing it to emergency management, I was very lucky to be placed in the health and medical unit with a health and medical background and really bring that clinical knowledge to our emergency plans, not just within the agency with our agency health and safety committee, but across the city of New York with many of our healthcare partners. Some of the most meaningful activations were just this year in 2020. I had the opportunity to deploy to Puerto Rico in support of the earthquakes and really bringing that collaboration and the ability to create relationships in an environment that was new to me. There was many language barriers as well and social barriers, but being with an amazing team, bringing the experiences that I learned at the fellowship to create relationships in a new area and to really set the framework for my fellow colleagues to come down and mental health providers to come down to help the citizens of Puerto Rico. And then just now in the COVID-19 response, which has been unprecedented, not just in emergency management, but across the city in the United States. I've been in charge of coordinating across all public health and medical agencies in the city and also with our regional partners. Our unit's been facilitating many resource requests for critical supplies, ventilators, personal protective equipment, medications, and making sure that our hospital sector and our healthcare workers are prepared. And then I've had the distinct honor to work at our Javits New York Medical Station and create a hospital on a convention floor in 9 days. Really working on that relationship building. There was a lot of individuals that I worked with from the federal, the state, and local governments that we had relationships already and that we had built these working bonds in previous activations or in previous working groups. It was like getting the band back together, and it really helped us solve complex problems on the spot with novel solutions. So to say that we built one of the city's largest hospitals on that floor of the convention center and treat 1,095 patients is a highlight of my career that I'll never forget. And I'll also never forget working with many members of the Solomon family during this activation, not just here in emergency management with the public and private initiatives team here that puts on this fellowship and works with all of our private partners across the city, but with me Wong in our health and medical unit, with Robert Cohen, who was a mentor in the EOC, Stephanie Liu, who I worked with many long nights in the Javits Center, making sure that our healthcare patients and our healthcare providers had transportation to their hotels, to the workplaces, and when they were discharged back home. And Ron Spence at DSS and working with the homeless population and discharges from the Javits Center. Keith Grossman at the DOE. My screen. But in closing, it's really it's really amazing to see all of the Solomon Fellowship family, the public sector, the private sector, the non-profit sector work together to tackle such a large emergency that COVID-19 was. And I hope that you take all of the experiences that you've learned, take all of the relationships that you learned, and bring them as you grow in your professional career. And I look forward to working with you and watching you grow this amazing Solomon Fellowship family. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. And so now we will hear from James Solomon, who's John's brother and really the heart and soul behind the program, as he provides closing remarks for this year's graduation.
Thank you, Christina. Good morning, everyone. Yes, I can't hear you yelling good morning back. On behalf of my brother John's family and friends, I have the distinct privilege of congratulating the 10 stellar John D. Solomon Fellows. And as Christina said at the outset, because this fellowship is being streamed for the first time in the program's 8-year history, John's extended circle of friends and family across the country are able to attend. And I believe there are over 100 in John's circle watching right now. And that includes our parents, Ann and Dick, John's wife, Abby, and their remarkable daughters, Sarah and Rebecca. And as the photos attest, they've certainly grown, along with their commitment to public service. A warm welcome to everyone tuning in. For some of you, this may be the first you are hearing about the John D. Solomon Fellowship for Public Service. And truth be told, even those who knew John extremely well never fully grasped the importance that John placed on emergency preparedness. Let's just say in recent months, I think we've all gained a greater appreciation. I'd first like to share some of what I conveyed to our 10 fellows last fall at the start of their fellowship about the impetus for this program and about its namesake. In May 2013, the then head of FEMA, Craig Fugate, spoke to the first graduating class of John D. Solomon Fellows. And you'll see this photo of him. He's here in the bottom left corner, speaking at the New York Stock Exchange, which had generously donated use of a conference room. There were only 5 fellows at the time. Yet, Administrator Fugate had flown from Florida to New York through a hellacious storm to honor the memory of someone that he barely knew. In fact, he'd only met John once. Administrator Fugate began his remarks to the handful of John D. Solomon Fellows. He said, "When I first became aware of John, we hadn't even coined a phrase for it yet. John was a pioneer," Mr. Fugate said. "He was one of the very first citizen bloggers." Now, Mr. Fugate was referring to John's seminal blog, In Case of Emergency Reblog, a citizen's eye view of preparedness. John had initiated as research for a book he was writing, which in John's own words was, quote, "to serve as a guide and encouragement for citizens to prepare for 21st century crises." Mr. Fugate told that first class of John D. Solomon Fellows, "After my colleagues at FEMA got over the initial, 'Who is this person?' and 'Why is he telling me I'm not doing something right?' they began to recognize there was something we'd never had before, a two-way conversation with people." Minister Fugate continued in speaking to the fellows, "I only knew John through his blog," he said. "He wasn't part of government. It wasn't his chosen profession. But after 9/11, he saw a need for conversation. And so through his blog, he began elevating the discourse." Mr. Fugate confided to the fellows, "John wasn't easy on us. He didn't give us a pass. He held us accountable. He pointed out when we weren't getting it right. But he didn't criticize merely to shame us or point fingers or accuse people. He offered suggestions of ways to do it better." As for why John took up the cause, Mr. Fugate reason, John recognized after 9/11, he said, the administrator said, John recognized the sense of hopelessness that somehow, some way our lives were taken away from us. John found that by being prepared and by learning about things, it gave people control back, which had seemed to have been ripped away. Through his blog, Mr. Fugate concluded, John took 9/11 and turned it around and said, we don't have to be afraid. We can get control back by being prepared. Well, at a time when it often feels like the world is spinning beyond our control, it's hard not to wonder, not to mourn, how John's two-way conversations might have helped us feel less afraid. Two people with whom John was engaged in such conversations were Deputy Commissioner Christina Farrell and Assistant Commissioner Ira Tannenbaum. And they are pictured at the bottom right. Those two are the engines behind the John D. Solomon Fellowship. Christina and Ira, in collaboration with their amazing deputy, Amanda Kravchik, assembled an extraordinary group of fellows and mentors this year. Listening to the fellows describe their wonderful experiences this year, it's with the knowledge that the person who'd be most eager to celebrate your achievements would be John. In the way of background, our 10 fellows graduated from colleges across the nation, from Hawaii to Maine, New Orleans to Ames, Iowa. This year's fellows come from graduate programs at 5 area universities: Baruch, NYU, Columbia, City University, and Pratt. It should also be noted that nearly every John D. Solomon Fellow brings extensive prior work experience to their fellowships. This year's fellows' work backgrounds include a registered nurse focused on pediatric orthopedics, an EMT responsible for overseeing 19 ambulances and 230 employees, a research scientist, a code enforcement official from Burlington, Vermont, a touring musician, a cancer care advocate who's also a cancer survivor, and a native New Yorker whose driving reason to work in public health was the loss of her aunt in the South Tower of the World Trade Center. While none of you fellows knew John personally, you share much in common: passion for public service, a belief that an individual can make a difference, and a desire to make your life matter. Each of you exemplify what made John, John. In your generosity of spirit, Alex W., as expressed in your appreciation for your mentors and in your work within the Public-Private Initiatives Unit, in your talent for connecting others, Betty, as exhibited by the critical information you communicated to FDNY's numerous bureaus and divisions, in your caring and compassion, Ariel, as demonstrated by the mental health resources you identified for the auxiliary police, in your commitment to broadening the conversation, Alex E., by soliciting community voices often overlooked during emergency responses for the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, in your determination to ask the right questions, Miguel, as the program's first fellow at the Department of Environmental Protection, and in providing the right answers. In your determination to experience things firsthand, Hannah, from your prior global health travels to Puerto Rico and Beirut to your immersion at the American Red Cross. In your devotion to family, Khalid, both personally and professionally, perpetuating your family's remarkable history of public service and in training hundreds of fellow EMTs. In your seeking a range of perspectives, Patrick, by building upon your prior government experience in Vermont and bringing it to the New York City Department of Social Services, and in the process helping create the city's hurricane sheltering plan. In your empathy, Sam, as you've shared in the past, growing up in Iowa sensitized you to natural disasters uprooting lives. You brought that sensitivity and resiliency to your work this year at the Department of Education. And finally, in your up for and open to anything, Stacy, through your curiosity and rigor, you made the most of your fellowship in the Intergovernmental Affairs Unit, from borough cabinet meetings to city council hearings to a community preparedness boot camp. And so, John D. Solomon Fellows, if there's just one thing I hope you take from my remarks today, it's thank you. First and foremost, thank you for your service. Thank you for your two-way conversations and helping us gain control back. And thank you for enabling us to glimpse aspects of John. Thank you, mentors, for your example, for devoting your time and selves to the fellows, and most especially to John's beloved New York City, particularly during this time. A special thank you to John Solomon Fellow turned mentor Rob Bristol for your terrific remarks today, and most especially your Herculean efforts during the past months. Thank you, fellowship alumni, for your presence online today and your ongoing support of this program. Thank you, Commissioner Criswell, for your leadership and for your very kind words. Thank you, fellowship impresarios, Christina, Ira, and Amanda, for a fellowship program genuinely worthy of its namesake. And finally, thank you to John's extended family and friends out there for your unwavering love and support of this meaningful undertaking. We look forward to seeing you all next May in person. Stay safe and well, everybody. Back to Christina and Ira.
Thank you, Jim. So as we close, anyone who has worked with us at Emergency Management for any length of time, know that I ceded the last word to Ira many years ago. So I will let Ira close.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it, Christina. Thank you very much. And for those of you who have participated in previous Solomon events, I, for the record, lost the tiering bet on Jim. He made it all the way through. So but we'll get back to that in the future. As many, as amazing as it is to be here today to celebrate the future, I just wanted to mention that and think about the importance of remembering the past and having had the opportunity to work with John and how he has guided us. Jim mentioned the comments to Administrator Fugate, but I've told the Solomon family numerous times, and I've thought about it repeatedly during this COVID response. I would get calls from John Solomon on my cell. I don't know how he got the number originally, but he would constantly be asking me about how we could better engage the private sector, how we could make sure that the private sector had the opportunity to do its part and to contribute. And it laid the groundwork for a lot of the work that we are doing now, providing a pathway for our private sector partners to integrate into the city's response, to support us, whether it's philanthropic or operational. It is something that we're doing a lot of work with the private sector, and much of it reflects back on the work we did with John. So this has been an incredible opportunity. Thank you again to the Solomon family for supporting this and championing this effort, and we look forward to continuing this effort for many years to come. Thank you again for everything that you guys have done for us.